Hello and welcome everyone. When life gives you lemons, make lemon loaf. That's the saying, right? Join me today on Andrew's Treats and Eats as we tackle this tangy treat and cook up a lovely lemon loaf. Anyone that knows me knows that I'm a big fan of tart desserts and treats. I'd much rather have a sour piece of lemon pie than a sweet, rich piece of chocolate cake any day. If you're like me and a fan of the more tangy things in life, hopefully you'll love this recipe. For the loaf portion of today's recipe, you will need 2 cups of flour, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, half a teaspoon of baking soda, half a teaspoon of salt, half a cup of room temperature butter, 1 cup of white sugar, 3 room temperature eggs, half a cup of room temperature sour cream, 2 tablespoons fresh lemon juice, the zest of several lemons. You can use a little or a lot depending on your preferences here. As a quick note, if your lemon zest isn't very pungent, feel free to add a few drops of pure lemon extract to the batter. It will really help to liven things up. Lemon loaf at its core is just a lemon flavored pound cake with lemon icing or syrup drizzled over the top. I personally prefer a lemon loaf that is drenched in tangy lemon syrup, so you'll also need the following: half a cup of lemon juice and half a cup of white sugar. Depending on how moist you'd like the final loaf to be, you can adjust the amount of syrup as desired. Sometimes I even make a bit of extra syrup so that people can add more to their slices of the loaf if they choose to. First things first, we need to preheat our oven to 325 Fahrenheit. Since this is essentially a loaf-shaped cake, we will also want to make sure that we take our eggs, sour cream, and butter out of the fridge. We need to let them warm to close to room temperature, which usually takes about 30 minutes. Next, we're going to prepare our loaf pan. You can either use an 8x4 or 9x5 loaf pan for this recipe. I recommend the latter as it allows the loaf more room to spread and it will help it cook more evenly. Spray your pan with non-stick spray or grease it with butter. Then cut out a strip of parchment paper that is as wide as your pan but much longer than it. This is a super helpful baking trick when you're working with loaves that you want to remove from the baking pan easily. Place the parchment in the pan and let the sides dangle outside of the pan, and we'll use these later as handles to remove the loaf from the pan safely. Now we're going to mix the dry ingredients. Add the baking powder, baking soda, and salt to the flour and gently whisk them together. Then set them aside. Next, we're going to start working with the wet ingredients. I'll be using a hand mixer for today, but you can use a small stand mixer or even just a whisk or wooden spoon to prepare this if you want. To start with, we're going to dump our butter into a mixing bowl and then beat it to make sure it's nice and soft. Once the butter is beaten, we're going to slowly add the sugar. Then we're going to beat this as well to make sure that the sugar and butter are well distributed. Next, we're going to add the lemon zest, lemon juice, and any lemon extract we plan to use to the sugar and butter mixture. Once again, we're going to beat this well. This is a good time to taste the mix to check if there is enough lemon flavor. If not, you can add more zest or lemon extract. Remember though that the zest will release more of its flavor and aroma as the cake cooks. Then we are going to slowly add the eggs to this mixture. Adding 1 egg at a time, beat the mixture until it's light and fluffy looking. Make sure to scrape the bowl down between each egg addition. Once all 3 eggs are incorporated and the mixture is well beaten, we can begin the fancy part of this recipe. Since this is essentially a cake, we don't want to overwork the flour, so we're going to alternate our addition of dry ingredients and our addition of sour cream. Add 1/3-ish of the flour to the wet ingredients and then slowly mix this in. I like to scrape the bowl once everything looks incorporated and blast it with a very quick high-speed mix to be sure. Once that third of the dry ingredients is incorporated fully, we're going to add half of our sour cream to the mix. Just like with the dry, mix it slowly at first, then blast it with a quick mix. We then repeat this process, adding 1/3 dry, then the final half of sour cream, and finally the last third of dry ingredients. The batter is going to be thick, and that's okay. Dump the batter into the pan and then shake or tap the pan to get it to settle. You can smooth the top or leave it rough for a more rustic looking loaf, baker's choice. Now we have the worst part of the whole process, waiting for it to bake in the oven. Toss the loaf into the oven preheated to 325 and bake for 40 to 60 minutes, or until a toothpick or wooden skewer stabbed into the middle comes out clean. Now while that's cooking, we can make our lemon syrup. Mix half a cup of sugar and half a cup of lemon juice in a large microwave-safe bowl or measuring cup. Then microwave it in 1-minute increments, stirring in between until the syrup is hot and all of the sugar is fully dissolved. You can scale this up as needed. Just keep the ratio of sugar to lemon juice at 1:1. Then set the syrup aside and patiently wait for the loaf to bake. Once the loaf is finished baking, remove it from the oven, and now the fun part begins. Poke a bunch of holes in the top of the loaf and pour over some of the lemon syrup while the loaf is still in the pan. Again, depending on how moist you want the loaf, you can add lots or just a little of syrup right now. Adding the syrup while the loaf is still in the pan allows the syrup to soak into the sides as well as the top of the loaf. After all, if you're going to get sticky while working with this syrup, it's only fair that you make sure that anyone eating it gets sticky as well. Then, using the parchment handles, lift the loaf from the pan and set it on a cooling rack over a baking pan or a plate to catch any syrup drips. Gently remove the parchment. Feel free to pour more syrup over as desired. This cake can absorb a lot of syrup without becoming soggy. Here you have it. Lemon loaf, a tasty, tangy treat. It's tart and yet still sweet, and of course very sticky. Hopefully this recipe will inspire you to give it a go and make yourself a lemon loaf. As you can see, I did actually end up making some extra syrup, doubled the amount of syrup that I made so that I'd have some left over to add to pieces as people want. If you do try out this recipe, be sure to send me pictures on Instagram or Twitter. I'd really love to see how it turns out for you, and I'd really like to hear what you think of it. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to bash the like button, and if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the bell icon so that you're notified of future Andrew's Treats and Eats episodes. If you have any comments, suggestions, or ideas for future recipes that you'd like me to make, be sure to leave them in the comment section down below. I will see you next time on Andrew's Treats and Eats.